Joining us now from the White House, Strategic Communications Director Mercedes Schlapp. Mercedes, great to have you with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Look, thanks for being here last night. You know, we're coming to you live from your nation's capital at Corey Lewandowski Milky Way Galactic Headquarters, our studio here, Mercedes. And so I'm in here, and Philip Rucker from the Washington Post walks in. And I chat with him for a second. He goes upstairs to interview Lewandowski in his offices upstairs. My studio is downstairs. Rucker sends out, Jake, a bunch of nasty tweets yesterday on the president's speech. He said he was reading it, and he didn't look good, and he seemed disinterested. Then he leaks an off-the-record meeting that I guess the president had. In my day, off-the-record means like you don't leak it. Like, what is wrong with these people? How do you do that job every day knowing that nothing you say is ever reported accurately and the fake newsers leak stuff when it's supposed to be off the record? Just before we get into this speech, how do you deal with this, Mercedes, day in and day out?
Well, you know, I think what our focus is always is to make sure that we can get directly to the American people, and that's why we feel very strongly, and it's why the president is the tweeter-in-chief. I mean, he knows how to tweet. He knows how to get his message directly out. We obviously feel very strongly that not only is it through social media, but even last night when the president was able to give this very important national address and give the facts to the American people as to why there's a humanitarian crisis and a national security crisis on the border. You know, the media is going to do that. We know where the liberal media is going to be. There's no question that they've written their story even before they listen to the president. They don't like this man. They haven't liked him. They're upset he's won, and they're not going to ever give him the benefit of the doubt. They're willing to call him, you know, names from liar to sexist, et cetera, and it's just childish coming from the liberal media. And it's why, you know, I feel so strongly that, you know, I get to spend time with the president every day, and I see where his heart is, and I know what he wants to do, and his intentions are very sincere. He wants to ensure that our country is safe. It is his first duty as president to keep America safe. And while you had, you know, and you mentioned this, true, while you had Senator Schumer at one point saying that he, you know, voted for Secure Defense Act, where he actually agreed that we need to have strong border security. They say this all the time in closed doors meetings, yet in public they're willing to just personally attack the president. They're willing to call this a manufactured crisis. Well, I'm sorry. If it's a manufactured crisis, then go tell the wife of Officer Singh that her husband's death is not important, that this is part of a manufactured crisis, because we had an illegal alien come through the border, basically disrespect our laws, and shoot this officer to death. And these people should not die in vain. I mean, this is so important that we're able to protect Americans. There's no reason. These deaths are preventable. There's no reason for illegal aliens to be in our country. We should be able to pick and choose who is coming into our country. And we welcome legal immigrants, but it's got to be done in an orderly fashion. And that's why the president's talking about the need of ensuring that we have border security.
Mercedes Schlapp, why do the Democrats keep disputing the data and the facts? Like at the on-the-record briefing you had, what was that, on Monday that I was at? Secretary Nielsen and yourself laid out a litany of facts that come right from, you know, federal government data that are undisputable. Why do the Democrats, do they not read it? Do they not care? Why do they keep saying it's a made-up crisis when all the data's there?
Well, Speaker Pelosi mentioned at the meeting with the president that she thinks because Nielsen is an appointee of the president, said it's political. These facts are political. And Secretary Nielsen went right back at her and said, "Let me explain something to you, Madam Secretary. This is an insult because this data comes from career men and women from Customs Border Patrol. Kevin McAleen, who's our head of Border Patrol, Customs Border Patrol Protection, he worked under Obama. Now he's under President Trump, and he knows what resources our men and women need at the border. And we also know the resources that ICE needs as well. But the problem is that the Democrats have decided that they're going to demonize these people. Let me explain to you. The Customs Border Patrol agents, they've actually saved lives, because what happens is that these awful smugglers who make a very good profit literally take these children and drop them over the border, many times leaving them by themselves. And guess who rescues them? The Customs Border Patrol agents. And yet the Democrats continue to demonize these individuals, and all these individuals are doing is they're doing their jobs. They want to keep America safe, and they want to ensure that we have an orderly process at the border, and this is something that the Democrats are preventing.
Why? Let me just ask you this question. What is their objective here? I mean, obviously it's not to secure the border. Obviously it's not to stop illegals from coming in. Obviously it's not to control the crisis. What is their objective?
Well,
Mercedes?
I think their objective is that it's called open borders. Nancy Pelosi explained this, where she said a wall is, quote unquote, culturally immoral. She went even beyond immoral, culturally immoral, to have that between Mexico and the United States. What we're saying is that this physical barrier works, and what we're saying is that the physical barrier does result in reducing the number of illegal crossings. Again, we want to welcome legal immigrants to our country. We want to do this in an orderly way. We want to do this in a way where it matches with the economic needs of our country, but we cannot continue to ignore the constant flood of illegal aliens coming across the border, where it's about 2,000 that CBP are apprehending every day. And let me tell you what happens to these folks. They're detained, and then we don't have any more detention space. So what happens after 20 days? They're released into the interior, meaning we never hear from them again. So they're in our country illegally, and we have no idea where they are. They don't show up to the courts. Why? Because we have a backlog of cases, over 800,000 cases that need to be listened to, and then guess what? They don't show up. So then we've created this cycle, this broken cycle of just allowing illegal immigration to just thrive in America, where they're not following the rules, and we're not rewarding those individuals who have done their applications and are trying to come into this country legally.
Well, Mercedes Schlapp, as the president said in the briefing the other day, he said only 2%, the facts show that only 2% of those that are released after 20 days that are claiming asylum. He said, look, 90% of the claims are found to be insufficient. Only 10% are accurate. But of the people that come in and make the claim, only 2% of those return. So 98% get released and they're gone. They're just absorbed into the country, right? So you have, I mean, the numbers are stunning. When you talk about 2,000 a day, that's 60,000 a month. Over a 12-month period, you're talking about 720,000 people coming here illegally just now, which is the size of the city of Seattle. And it's just a mind-boggling amount of people, as the president tried to put forth last evening. One of the other things I want you to talk about is the fact that part of the president's solution is more money for humanitarian efforts, more housing on the other side of the border as people wait for their asylum claims to go through. Mercedes Schlapp, can you speak to that?
Yes. Again, part of the proposal that that our Office of Management and Budget sent over to Congress includes this about $800 million to address urgent humanitarian needs. This would be for enhanced medical support, transportation, and actually additional temporary facilities for processing the vulnerable population, which would be these women and children who are coming in. That is part of the proposal that the Democrats actually wanted, and we said, okay, we'll throw that in there and make sure we have that in there. Another thing that the Democrats actually agree with us on is providing resources for what they call counter-narcotic and weapons technology. So they would be able to detect narcotics, weapons, anything that's coming through, any materials that pose any like nuclear and radiological threats. They would be able to have that technology to be able to deter and detect more contraband. This is something that Democrats agree with. Other thing that we're also pushing for is, and the Democrats actually proposed in the meeting, was in-country asylum processing for Central American minors. This would then avoid for the youth to then take the dangerous track where you have many young girls being sexually assaulted on their way as they try to get to the border, and they're able to apply for asylum in country. So we are there at the table with what we would say is including Democrat request, yet they still refuse to negotiate. So I find this to be incredibly frustrating, because I know that what Nancy is facing in the House are these radical Democrats who truly just want open borders. And while Nancy at one point, basically continues to say we need to do more on border security, is unwilling to do something that we know works, which is a physical barrier. And that's what our Border Patrol agents, those from the bottom up, have told us, that if you put these physical barriers in place, we are able to control better who's coming in and being able to process them in an effective manner, as opposed to just what we're seeing right now, where people are just going in between ports and just coming in through the border that way.
You're absolutely right. We're with Mercedes Schlapp. Mercedes is the Strategic Communications Director for the White House and for President Trump, and she's live from the White House today. Mercedes, one of the things that you mentioned the other day when we chatted a little bit, you said that federal workers, as tough as this may be to miss a paycheck this Friday, and it is a hardship on people, there's no doubt, some people that live paycheck to paycheck, you said, eventually they're going to get their money, right? Whenever this is resolved, 3 weeks, 4, 5, 6, they're going to get all of their money. But you said that those that have lost a loved one, well, they don't get their loved one back. Can you speak to that?
That's correct. Again, I think that, look, I know that it's unfortunate that the federal workers are stuck in the middle of this fight. The president made it very clear that we have to rise above politics and work together to come to a solution. And, we know that there's one thing that would happen. If we just simply reopen the government, the Democrats have no want to negotiate on getting a deal done. They just don't. They'll keep kicking the can down the road. This is what they do. They have no interest in actually coming up with a solution. And so, I do think that when you remember those who have lost their lives, in the case of officers saying, we can go case after case after case of individuals who have been killed by illegal aliens. These are individuals who should have never been in the country in the first place. And so I think the Democrats need to say, am I going to stand with a criminal illegal alien, or am I going to stand with the American people and make sure that they are safe? We always talk about the facts, of course, that there are those who are vulnerable. You have these women and children who are trying, who are going to make their cases for asylum, these family units, for example. But the reality is that those individuals, those criminals that we've seen ICE detain, which is close to 20,000 that have been convicted of sex crimes, of murders, those people that are illegal should have never been here. And so we want to make sure that the legal immigrants who are coming in are those who are going to be productive members of our society and who follow the law. And I think that is a very common sense approach on how we need to deal with immigration. And it's why the president felt it was important to share that message last night to the American people.
So, Mercedes, lay out for our listeners, the battle is over, $5 billion or some amount of funding to continue a structure, a wall, a barrier. Why is that the linchpin in this debate? What would that $5 billion do in order to solve some of the crisis items that you've laid out today? Explain that.
The way Secretary Nielsen explains it so beautifully, she talks about gaining operational control along the southern border. And what they would do, it would create what you need, the capability. So you're able to, it's the physical barrier that would construct the total, what they need to do, which is 200 miles of a new physical barrier, so that's what it would do, as well as fully fund the top 10 priorities for custom border protection, border security improvement plan. So they have identified 10 priorities, and that money would fund those 10 priorities in addition to make sure that we're able to fund the construction of about 234 miles of new physical barrier. So that is that. I mean, the $5 billion literally is peanuts compared to what the Democrats spend on other items. For example, in the bill that Nancy Pelosi is pushing through, she added $12 billion of foreign aid that is going to go to other countries. So they're willing to add money to foreign aid for other nations for economic development and such, yet not even carve out $5 billion for much-needed funding at the border.
Okay, so I just got to get your comments on this because what has been leaked is that in the off-the-record luncheon with the president before a speech yesterday with anchors, the New York Times has leaked that the president said, look, I have to make this speech, but really the wall isn't going to matter. That's what's being reported today in the New York Times, which is counter to the entire argument that we're trying to make. So did he say that, or
that's not accurate? That is absolutely not accurate. It's typical of the New York Times.
So that is
not accurate at all. No, I think that I think he made it very clear. Look, I think he was saying at the end of the day, the president understands. Look, these congressional Democrats have been literally blinded and not willing to negotiate, despite the fact that we're providing good faith offers. We have yet to see a good faith offer from the Democrats. And so I think that the president has always talked about that the walls work. The president has always talked about that we need physical barriers. He just had several individuals from ICE and Border Patrol from the unions also saying, Mr. President, you're doing the right thing. We need to make sure that there's physical barriers at the border. It is what actually works to help significantly reduce illegal crossings. So that is not an accurate representation of what happened in the meeting and the comments that the president said.
So, Mercedes, can we comfortably, based on you being there, classify what the New York Times is reporting today leaked as fake news?
Yeah, there's a lot of fake news coming out of the New York Times. I always kind of have to laugh when they're like sources closest to familiar to the White House, close to the White House, and then you've been there because you've been in the actual meeting, and you're like, where did they get this? So I just find that it would be a great day in America when we get straight up news and understand what has actually happened in these meetings. And I think that's one of the reasons why the president feels so strongly to be transparent and direct with the American people as to what we need to do, what our goals are in terms of achieving true border security, and why it is a bipartisan issue. And it's something that we have even heard the Democrats say they want strong border security. So they call it a manufactured crisis. That is a horrible mistake. I don't believe you can look at a parent who has lost a child that was coming to the border, a manufactured crisis. I don't think you can tell those women who have been raped along the border that this is a manufactured crisis. And I don't think you can tell those Americans who have lost loved ones because of illegal immigration and illegal aliens who have killed their loved ones that this is a manufactured crisis. This is a priority. This is something we need to deal with for decades. This problem has not been solved. I mean, I worked in the Bush administration. I can tell you that I remember the days when we were talking about immigration reform, and it just didn't get anywhere. And this president's willing to take a risk and say, let's take action now and do what our Border Patrol agents who are career are saying, these are the resources we need to get this problem solved. The reality, though, is that the Democrats have little interest in fixing our broken immigration system. They have little interest in stopping the flow of illegal aliens coming into our country. They just simply agree with the open borders policy. It's what they support. They have never, when you talk about Kate's Law, ending sanctuary cities, basic legislation, they don't do anything. They just refuse to be helpful in any of the legislation that we've pushed forward. And so I think that's incredibly, it puts some, America needs to decide, are we going to be a place where we have orderly legal immigration? Are we going to be a nation where we're going to ensure that we know who's coming in and out of our country? And are we going to be a nation where we have borders like all the other nations? And so I think that's an important priority.
You nailed it. That's the argument here. The Democrats, by their actions, big talk, no action, what they don't do, they're simply the party now of open borders, I guess we're just a landmass, and they want policies which encourages anybody to come in. And we've been over this argument 100 times. Their incentive to do that is they eventually turn them into cheap votes. And so you've got this persistent situation. I want to thank you for your time today, Mercedes. We're with Mercedes Schlapp. She is the Strategic Communications Director at the White House. Mercedes, thank you for being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.